I'm always stunned when critics are like, there's no pace, something's long, something's everything. I'm like, if you put Chinatown in front of people today, they'd annihilate that movie.
Yeah.
What's his motivation? He has none. Someone played him. Like he doesn't even like Evan Mulray. He's just like Americans. He's just a little bit annoyed that someone thinks they can put one over on him, and that's enough for him to just go poke and poke and poke until he starts to get really annoyed.
Everyone, and welcome to episode number 11 of The Fourth Wall. I am your host, Griffin Schiller, and this is the show where we break down the fourth wall of the film industry as we get an inside look through our conversations with industry professionals ranging from directors, actors, you name it. This show is, of course, part of the Playlist Podcast Network, where you can find our weekly film discourse show, along with our other shows such as Indie Beat, Be Real, you name it, whatever your fix is, we got you covered over there. My guest today is someone who truthfully needs no introduction. It is finally Mr. Edward Norton. Now, I know I've been teasing this one for a little while, but I am absolutely thrilled to be able to bring it to you. Norton is truly one of the great talents of our generation, whose diverse body of work has spanned across films such as Primal Fear and American History X, both of which earned him Academy Award nominations, Fight Club, The Incredible Hulk, and Birdman, just to name a few. His latest project, Motherless Brooklyn, is the product of 2 decades worth of work, as Norton wrote, directed, produced, and starred in the noir film based off of the 1990 novel of the same name by Jonathan Lethem. Now, this is a very interesting conversation because it started off fairly normal, we got some groundwork laid, it turned into a fairly standard interview, but the second I mentioned noir and the big sleep, a big shift happened in the conversation, and it began to feel just really fun to talk about classic cinema with a legend such as Edward Norton. And so I think when you're listening to this interview, you're going to notice the shift, and it's something great. And it was just truthfully a real treat to hear someone like this talk about film in that sort of way. So all of you cinephiles are really going to dig this one as we discuss the effectiveness, appeal, and boldness of classic film noir such as The Big Sleep and Chinatown, along with influences such as Warren Beatty's Reds and Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing had on Motherless Brooklyn, and why films such as those excite him. So we talk about a lot, and hopefully you all enjoy it as much as I enjoyed talking to Mr. Edward Norton. So without further ado, here is our conversation. Last night was your was the first time you showed the film in New York, I guess, and I'm kind of curious what it was like, what the atmosphere was like, being able to finally show a movie so steeped in New York culture to like a proper New York audience.
It was magical. It was magical. There's no other word for it. It was just great. It was. I've been going to the New York Film Festival since I was 1989. So there's no audience is ever going to get every dimension of the value of every little bit of where you shot things and what you're referencing, and so it had the special magic of a true hometown crowd audience.
Sure. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right, which always has to be encouraging and fun and stuff, but one of the so I was actually really looking forward to talking to you, because I know that you grew up in Columbia, Maryland, and I'm also from Maryland, and I grew up in Frederick, and I was just curious about, I guess, what it was like for you kind of growing up there, and how that environment sort of influenced your career and stuff like that?
Influenced my career. I'm not sure. I mean, I was lucky and grew up in a family where the arts were very celebrated. You know, I mean, I had uncles who were painters and musicians, and my grandfather, who was a famous urban developer and philosopher, really was a passionate believer in the arts within communities. He was a huge supporter of, like, you know, he rallied the community to underwrite the building of Baltimore Center Stage long before I was born. He wanted a school of theatrical arts in Columbia, which he, you know, he recruited this woman, Toby Ornstein, who was a real theater genius, like a true impresario and educator. And a lot of us who went through her programs went into, you know, not just careers in the arts, but national careers, like people who were on Broadway and Les Mis and became composers or musicians, like a songwriter who I know who does lots of films, scores now, went to that same school with me. And you know, it was more, I think there was an appreciation for the arts around me when I was young that made it seem like it was the furthest thing from feeling like a career choice that wouldn't have support. Do you know what I mean? Like, I mean, some people talk about, you know, their experience of their family being dismayed by it's like Bruce Springsteen and, you know, his dad, and the clash of wills over what does a person, you know. I didn't have any of that. My parents took us to the theater like once a month, you know, and watched movies with us. And it was always a part of, it was always in the matrix to me of things that were considered of value and serious, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, that's you're right, because it really does come down to, your upbringing and, you know, the acceptance of being in like an artful family. And I mean, and I had that same sort of nurturing background myself, in terms of the arts. And so it's just kind of, it's interesting to just kind of like hear you mention that, because it is so true. I did, because you mentioned your grandfather, and I thought it was really interesting because, he, you know, was very influential in you know, basically developed Columbia proper, I guess. And, you know, something that's very integral in Motherless Brooklyn is, you know, the celebration of communities of, you know, and then you touch on, you know, redistricting and gentrification a little bit. And so I was curious, because the way your grandfather did it, to my knowledge, was the right way. He like maintained the cultures that were already there, in like building up this new area. And then we kind of see the struggle that, you know, Brooklyn as a community is going through in trying to maintain that, you know, their identity there. And so I was kind of curious, you know, given that family history, was that something that attracted you to some of the motifs in the original novel?
No, the novel really has not that much to do with the themes and narrative of the film, other than the relationship, other than the core of Lionel's history, the guys in the agency, and his love of Minna. You know, beyond the loss of Minna and the idea that that's what propels him to sort of step into Minna's shoes and go out of his comfort zone, that's sort of where the line of the novel ends and the movie begins. To me, the novel, the allure of the novel, the hook of the novel, is entirely the character, which it is in the film too. What the novel does that I wanted to replicate is it creates this instant affinity for this very unusual character by putting you inside his head even as you watch him trip himself up in ways that are funny and also painful. And it's so effective that you kind of go through the book without almost even caring whether you understand what's going on, because you're really just riding with this character. And I felt, for a variety of reasons, Jonathan and I both thought setting it in the 50s would be more true to the spirit of the book and the types of stories that it's evoking. Mm-hmm. The book has kind of a meta surreal thing of old school 50s gumshoe sort of vibe, but in the modern world. And it's got this kind of, there's a novelistic trick going on there that in film might quickly turn into like just pure comedy or irony, like the Blues Brothers or something like that, you know, retro chic. And we didn't really want to do that. And so the answer, the short answer is that the novel's resonance with the things that my grandfather was interested in, that I was immersed in, that wasn't it. The novel's, the inspiration of the novel was the character. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the character and the demonstration that you could sort of like use the character as a vehicle in the story. But what I said to Jonathan was, what if we take your detective, like Raymond Chandler's Marlowe or something? What if we take your detective and we travel with him through another story? And he was beyond into it. He was like, he loved it. Because he wasn't, I don't want to say he wasn't enamored of it, but Jonathan's focus was the character as well. It wasn't the story of the novel,
right?
Which was pretty esoteric. You know, he dug it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that kind of speaks to, you know, what is so interesting about noir in general, because it's not, the films are not usually ever really about the story or whatnot. I mean, like it's obviously a part of it, but you're right. It is, the focus is on the character. Like, I mean, the first one that comes to mind for me is like The Big Sleep. I couldn't tell you the first thing of what that film is about, but I remember the characters and their interactions
and the dialogue. Yeah, and the dialogue. I watched that. I watched that before talking about it again on the Turner Classic Movie Show recently. Yeah. And I had seen it quite a few times. Didn't remember a lick of what the plot was about. Not a lick. Literally just remembered that it has to do with the seedy goings on of an upper class family.
Right.
Right. That's all if you'd said to me, why is The Big Sleep famous, or why is it good noir? What is it about? I would have just said, that, you know, it's like, it says that underneath sort of snooty American society is, you know, are the degraded and dark goings on of that the plutocratic rich are degraded. Yeah. You know what I mean? That's the thing. But you don't. The sister, you're like, I like, is it a younger sister or what is it? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you can't,
yeah.
And what's gone on with the cops that the guy had hired before, and who's doing what? It's so convoluted.
Right.
But if you ever needed proof, Chinatown equally, but if you ever needed proof that noir is not about whether the audience gets lost or not, they always get lost. Mm-hmm. They get really lost. And the point is, Big Sleep is mostly style. The pleasures are pure style. It's like, it's just the dialogue. The dialogue's so really, really funny, really great. You know, it's like, I got a bottle of rye in my pocket. Maybe we should get wet inside. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just great. It's just great. You're just guffawing in the best way. It's great. Style. It's not even, honestly, not to go bog down in The Big Sleep, but it's not even really that it's not photographically very interesting.
Right.
It's not like a high craft noir. It's just great writing, and it's great Bogart he's in his best zone of a kind of a nonchalant cool, you know what I mean? And that's it. That's really it. Chinatown to me is a much more elevated example of it because it's going even deeper with the idea that there's a shadow narrative under who we say we are. It's like California is the symbol of our American, like the sunny narrative of America, literally the dreams and remaking yourself and opportunity for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. That's really the California dream, opportunity for everybody. Literally, they used to sell California real estate by saying, why rent when you can own, right? Yeah. It's like, you're going to make your life out here. But the whole thing was built on a ripoff of enormous proportion, the theft of water at a scale that was hard for people to wrap their heads around, you know, and it basically said, not only under sunny California is a crime, but it's a crime by people that have accumulated so much power, who are so sure that the world can't perceive the scale of what they're doing, that they've so lost their grip on any sense of accountability that they rape their daughters and rationalize it. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it says the unknowability of the way that this kind of power functions cannot be contended with. You know, I tried to keep someone from getting hurt, and I made sure she got hurt in the worst way, and then it happens all again. You know what I mean? It's like and at the end, the darkest message ever, like, do as little as possible. Don't get, you know, it's like literally don't get involved. And it's like this guy, you know, his whole family was killed by the Nazis, and his wife was murdered by Charles Manson. So, you know, and it's happening at the end of Vietnam. It's like, it's really a pretty bleak look, but it's a very, very, it's such a fine piece of filmmaking. It has such an amazing photography, and the music and the dialogue. It's like a hypnosis. You just don't care that you don't care at all. Even more than The Big Sleep, I think Chinatown's true hypnosis. You don't have any idea what's going on, and you just don't care. You're in the drift, and you get into a state of you get into this hypnotic state where you'll kind of watch Nicholson go anywhere and do anything, and it's all so dreamy and mysterious that even when you begin to think you know what's going on, it's actually something totally different. You know what I mean? It's like, and you don't come away like, I'm always stunned when critics are like, there's no pace, something's long, something's everything. I'm like, if you put Chinatown in front of people today, they'd annihilate that movie. Yeah. You know, what's his motivation? He has none. Someone played him. Like, he doesn't even like Edward Norton. He's just like Americans. He's just a little bit annoyed that someone thinks they can put one over on him, and that's enough for him to just go poke and poke and poke until he starts to get really annoyed. You know what I mean? And that's like really mature, really deep, because it's like, it basically is like saying, I can make a film. It's like Polanski's going like, I can put you under a friggin' spell. I know how to. I'm going to put you under a spell.
It's magic.
And you're not gonna. No, and you're not gonna care why anybody's doing what they're doing. You're not gonna care if you understand what's going on. And in the end, you're not going to be able to narrate it back that they're dumping water in the night to drive the orange groves down to buy up the land using old people at a social club. You don't fucking know any of that. No one says those things. No one talks about the Albacore Club in Chinatown. They say, like, you know, oh God, it was incest, and somewhere way down under there, L.A. the fortunes of L.A. were built by stealing water and just dark big corruption. That's it. That's all. That's the essence of the movie.
I guess for the last question here, you know, given where your career has started and how it's kind of evolved over the years. Can you sort of quantify how the stories you're interested in telling have changed? Has this like influenced more directorial endeavors? Do you think there's maybe a little bit of an arc from where you were there and where you are now?
No, I mean, everybody's always reassessing the balance of life. You know, it's like but the things that get me out of bed, creatively speaking, are I think my aspirational targets are the same as they've always been. I've always been looking to where I can to find things that resonate with the moment. I mean, I really believe in Joseph Campbell's kind of concept of transparency, that things with real potency are the things that people can see through them and see how this is really about them, you know. And if something's opaque, people can get entertained by it, but it's a passive experience. You know, if it's transparent and they can see themselves in it, then that's what people called the zeitgeist, right? That's why The Graduate was a very potent film for that generation in that moment, right? It was very provocative to people. That's why Fight Club works. That's why, you know, things that people can feel resonating in their own daily lives around them just have more, they stick a little more, you know, or they feel identification, they feel seen in it. And those are always the best things. I think the very, very, very best things to also get it, like, to me, I love movies like Reds or like Do the Right Thing, or, you know, that sort of also get at like, what's the national character? What are the things that we're lying to ourselves about, not dealing with, not confronting? What's our story? What's all of our story, you know? And that, to me, that's like Motherless Brooklyn's very affected by, I was very inspired by people like Warren Beatty saying, you know, when he told me, people told him, no one wants to see a 3-hour movie about American socialists with documentary footage. And he was like, well, I do. You know, I do. I want to see it, and I think other people will get it. Will get that this is the alternative American story. This was a part of who we were too, and there was a lot of nobility in it. And it's a reminder. You know, Reds is a reminder that there were people. It all got tarnished later, right? It all got called the Red Menace. Yeah. But it's the reminder that actually there was this, in that era, which I reference in Motherless Brooklyn, that there was an era where people really thought, like, we need to think about each other collectively more. We need to care about everybody, right? And it was like, yeah, it was noble. It had its failings, but it was really amazing. There was this flowering of a moment where everybody really thought, what can we do to care about each other more and take care of more people? And it's amazing. It's really amazing. And I think that idea of the shift in America's value system before the war and after the war, literally it's in my voiceover. He says, you know, before the war, we were lifting ourselves out of the crash by taking care of each other. And after the war, Frank said, you know, he says, once we'd seen what we were capable of, it was like, the game's going to be about power from top to bottom. And it did, it changed, you know? Yeah. And it's sort of like, and that's Do the Right Thing to me too. Do the Right Thing is like, it's this grand question mark of when you feel, you know, it's compassionate. It gives you the point of view of Danny Aiello and John Turturro. But at the end it says, what do you do when you have people who feel marginalized and who are going to have an impulse toward violent reaction to their own oppression? And he gives you Martin Luther King's quote, and he gives you Malcolm X's quote, and he's like, we got to debate. We got to look at this shit. You know, it's really, it's very bold. That's why that movie was just like a hand grenade,
yeah.
you know? And I like where I can. I've always wanted to shoot for things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not easy to find, but I've been lucky and gotten to get inside a fair number of them, and I wanted to try to make one of them, you know?
Yeah, well, I think you really nailed it there. So congrats on the film again. I really applaud the effort that went into making it and the touching on just such timely material. Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, man.
Well, there you have it. That was my conversation with Edward Norton. It's honestly very rare that you get to have a full-blown conversation like that about an actor's love of film. So I'm just very thrilled that became part of the conversation. And hopefully you all enjoyed it just as much as I enjoyed conducting it and talking about that part of it. So Motherless Brooklyn is in theaters this Friday, November 1st, and is a nice throwback to classic film noir that I'm sure many of you will enjoy. But the most important thing is I want to hear from you all. I want to know what your favorite Edward Norton film is down in the comment section below of wherever you're listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the Playlist Podcast Network for more episodes of The Fourth Wall, along with the rest of our diverse film-centric catalog. And if you want to go that extra mile and you feel so inclined, you really want to help us out, it would be amazing if you left us a rating and a review, as it greatly helps the show out, helps us get noticed, and it allows me to know what you're loving and what you want to see more of. Next week, the Motherless Brooklyn train continues as my guest is Willem Dafoe, who is having one hell of a year, I might add. We not only dive into Motherless Brooklyn, but of course, we have to dive into the indie phenomenon that is The Lighthouse. And so I think you all are really going to enjoy that one. It was an absolute delight, and I can't wait to share it with you. But until then, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this episode, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.